I'm Amber.
Recording in progress.
I'm the youth center coordinator for NEK-TV here in Newport. Also did some work with Travis in my previous position, so happy to be here.
Pastor Larry, Church of God.
My name's Gabrielle.
I'm Chris Mitchell, AHS Field Director.
Travis Gaines, head of school at United Christian Academy.
Rick Everett Chase, Mayor of Newport.
Kevin Charles, I'm on the council.
Travis Big, Chief of Police at Newport. And I invited a couple other guests at the recommendation, and I think it's great that they're on. There's a couple on from probation and parole today, so Art, if you want to go.
So the Travis Gibney, District Manager, Newport Probation and Parole.
Rose Weber, Supervisor at Newport Probation and Parole.
I'm Jenna O'Farrell, the Safety Director of Northeast Kingdom Human Services. Northeast Kingdom Community Action. I was wondering if there's someone in the room from Northeast Kingdom Human Services. I can't hear, so I don't know if other people on Zoom, like we couldn't hear your introductions at all. And not that you need to do it again, but maybe we'll pick it up as the meeting goes on, but we can't really hear.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Because the owl is actually like right in front of me.
My name is Melissa, and I'm the Assistant Director of Journey to Recovery.
So y'all, can you hear me right now when I'm speaking, Jenna? Okay, so the issue is you've got to project in order to be heard on the owl, okay?
Yes, Rick, you are crystal clear. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, Travis.
All right, so from last meeting, we kind of left with some action plans of a couple of us were coming up with some ordinance policies to bring back for this meeting. Travis and I had worked on that, and we have that in front of us. I have hard copies here. I know I sent a copy to Art and Rose, Melissa and Jenna. I don't know if I have your email, but I certainly can forward it to...
It's in that, if you have the group email, you could just send it to, just hit reply all and send it to everybody.
I'll send it to that. That way you guys can have it too, because I think we're just gonna... My thought was to just walk through this, and if anybody on the task force at all has questions or recommendations, we'll make notes. We'll bring it back and make the adjustments that we all agree on to make, and then we'll go from there. So let me just...
I just put it in the chat. I don't know if you can see it. But I don't think I'm in the group email, but maybe Rick can add me. That would be great. Thanks.
Oh, you're not in it?
I don't think so, because I didn't get the invite for this meeting. It crashed.
Well, and I sent an email to everyone with the invite, but I didn't send a calendar invite because it was more complicated and I just ran out of time.
So I tried to do that with the people that you had on there.
Yeah.
So I did send a calendar invite.
Okay, but you need Jenna's email to add?
Yeah, so...
And Melissa just added her email in the chat too. So she might not be in there.
So Rick, I forwarded you the two policies here, or the policy and the legal review memorandum, and can you forward that to those two?
I'm sending them to Jenna and Melissa.
Melissa, yeah.
Yes, why don't you keep going and I'll try and figure that out.
Okay, so I think the easiest way to do this, hey Casey. Casey, if you want to just grab it, we're going to go through.
If we can squeeze this way a little bit, we're doing our best, Pam. It's a lot of people and we need to be around the table. So we'll do our best. We'll just come this way as much as we can. We're doing our best. And it's a difficult room and people have documents to work on today. That's the highest priority.
So I think the easiest way to do this is going to be those that have, I think everybody should have this in front of them now, is just to go through this, okay? And like I said, don't be afraid. You're not going to hurt our feelings. Travis did some good work on this when we got together last week. And him and I went through it and tried to comb out what we could initially. So let's just start The purpose and intent of this ordinance is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of its residents, particularly children, elderly individuals, and those vulnerable to harm due to disability, illness, or environmental risk, right? So that's the intent of this, okay? We'll just continue down through. Maintain safe, so ordinance, this is what we're trying to cover here. Maintain safe and accessible public spaces for all community members of the community. Prevent health and safety hazards associated with unsanctioned encampments. Protect children and vulnerable populations near schools, daycares, or other sensitive locations. Clarify municipal authority and process for addressing life safety risks on public property. It's not intended to criminalize homelessness or penalize individuals solely for lacking stable housing. Displace individuals involuntarily without due consideration of shelter availability, outreach efforts, or service coordination. Prohibit peaceful use of public spaces unless specific health, safety, or access conditions are compromised. Undermine the dignity of individuals experiencing poverty, mental illness, addiction, or trauma. It's the city's intent to pursue a balanced approach, one that honors human dignity and compassion while taking seriously its duties to safeguard the community and public infrastructure. And I've tried to make that clear from the beginning of this task force, like that's what we're trying to accomplish. Now it goes through some encampments. I don't think I necessarily need to read all of these like word by word, but a couple of them that I want to point out. Public property. Any city-owned or controlled land, including sidewalks, greenbelts, parks, right-of-ways, roadways, and municipal easements. Safety or sensitive locations, and this is expanded on after, but any location serving minors or vulnerable individuals, including but not limited to schools, daycare facilities, adult care centers, or public playgrounds. And then life safety hazard, any location or condition posing imminent risk or serious injury or death, including but not limited to extreme weather exposure, which we certainly have here. Proximity to active transportation corridors, railways, highways, high-risk environmental zones, areas obstructing emergency access. So, definitions for what we're going to get into. Any questions so far?
Do you have an extra copy of those that
Yep.
we can look at?
Yep.
Ann, would you hand one to Adam, please?
I will.
Thank you.
So the section 3 is encampments in high sensitivity areas. Encampments located in or adjacent to areas identified below present unacceptable risk to public safety, child protection, and infrastructure access, and shall be subject to immediate removal with no prior notice required. The high sensitive areas, schools and child serving locations. No encampment shall be permitted within 500 feet of any public or private K-12 school, early education program, licensed daycare facility, nonprofit organization serving children. The buffer includes all property boundaries, athletic fields, parking lots, adjacent sidewalks, wood buffers, and any other associated areas used regularly by children or staff. Playgrounds and recreation facilities. And this is kind of covered, I talked about it last time, like Gardner Park, you can't be in there after hours anyway, so that's kind of the area that I think of, but we do have playground access at Crowdy Beach as well, so it would come into play there. No encampment within any municipal playground, youth sports field, public park, trail, splash pad, pavilion, or family recreation activity, or actively used by minors. Bus stops, transit shelters, we do have transit shelters in the city for RCT, those kinds of things. Nothing within 300 feet of those. Student pickup or drop-off points as well. Daycare and adult care facilities, no encampment with 300 feet of licensed daycare, preschool, elder care, adult day service centers. Other sensitive municipal sites include cemeteries, community gardens, off-leash dog parks, transit centers, public trails or pathways, critical water infrastructure such as water towers, reservoirs, treatment plants, and pump stations.
Can I just ask quickly?
Absolutely.
Where 300 feet, the number came up, we came up with that, just out of curiosity. I don't think it's too far or too close, but.
Reference from other such policies,
Yeah.
like the
Okay.
one from St. John's area.
Remember, please, you're not talking to each other, you're talking to the owl. So talk up, speak up, please. Speak up.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys heard that. So his question was, where did we come up with the 300-foot kind of barrier within these sensitivity areas? And it was based off other ordinance and policies that we had access to, St. J particularly.
Just have one other quick. Just around the definition of encampment. As I was thinking about some of these as you were reading them off, thinking about maybe adding something in there like without prior approval of the landowner or something like that, because which one were you saying that we could do that? As it related to Prouty Beach.
Yep.
So like if someone's there at Prouty Beach and they're paying for it, but they're still considered homeless, they do have prior authorization to be there.
That would not be an issue.
Yeah, I was wondering if maybe like just adding that one line into the encampment.
Like make a note on here.
Without prior.
I think it was under playgrounds and recreational facilities.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'll make a note there just to, I'll just put Prouty Beach in the ordinance because we can specify it whatever we want. Okay. 3B. And don't be afraid to just interrupt me as we're going, right? If you guys have something, just stop me. Life safety and hazard zones, transportation and infrastructure corridors, no encampment on or within 50 feet of railway tracks, highway ramps, medians, bridge underpasses, or other active transportation rights of way, floodplain and environmental risk areas, prohibited in map floodplains, culverts, riverbanks, drainage areas, steep or unstable slopes, or FEMA designated flood zones. And for me, this is like the Clyde River Dam, right, up off Clyde Street. Like that all is a flood zone, and we have emergency operations stuff there. So if people are camping along that corridor there, that's where this would kind of fit in. Number 3, high traffic and pedestrian obstruction areas. No encampment in fire lanes, utilities, sidewalk and commercial corridors, municipal parking lots, or within 10 feet of fire hydrants and emergency access points. So the only, and this came up after the fact for me, but the only thing I would say here is there is occasions where people are traveling through town where they get permission to have their RV parked in our municipal parking lot overnight. And usually it's like, yeah, absolutely not a problem. So maybe I can get some language in here that specifies like with prior approval or something like that. Does that make sense?
Is there any, just out of curiosity, is there any kind of a standard kind of practice or policy regarding that? Because I know over the last several summers, some of those have gone on for over a month.
Yes, there's not. But I think with this, it's going to help, right? So we have no problem with people staying here, like they're traveling
a few nights,
crashing, right? But we also tell them, look, Walmart is literally half a mile up the road. They actually allow people to stay there for nothing in their parking lot, right? So there's that avenue as well. But there's nothing that's in writing saying that they can't stay there.
I don't want to nitpick too much. When I think about like equity, the person who can afford an RV versus the person with a tent or maybe a backpacker, right? Like say someone's doing a trek, right, and they want to throw their ultralight, tent up in the parking lot. I guess I just think about perception and how can we be equitable when we kind of approach this. So I almost would prefer none, right? Like just because you have an RV doesn't mean you should be able to park it in the municipal parking lot, but also don't want to lean towards extremes. So I don't know, just something to...
Chris, what's interesting about that, I've been watching that pretty closely the last 3 summers, and what mostly, and there are a few, like overnight stays that are pretty quick that tend to be the higher end, professional trekker,
sure,
right? But there's an awful lot of folks who stay longer term who are in pretty old, beat up vehicles who are, I think, staying there because they got nowhere else to go.
Right.
So, I think I've been appreciative actually that we haven't tried to distinguish between those two.
And my argument, and I appreciate that point, because it's a good point, but my argument would be, look, it's different to be in like an actual enclosed vehicle or in a tent, where if you get run over in a tent, it's not going to fare well for you, right, in a parking lot. And that would be my like safety argument of, you're in a tent, sorry, like you can't stay here.
Yeah. And I wasn't even considering vehicle traffic.
Yeah.
So that totally makes sense.
Yeah. But good, very good point, and well taken for sure. So, do you want me to just add the, like with prior approval, and then I can put from the chief or his designee as far as like the art, because it does happen occasionally.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Fire combustion hazards prohibited in areas with open flames, discarded needles, combustible waste, open electrical splices, illegal wiring, or hazardous materials such as gasoline or propane tanks. Pretty standard stuff. Extreme cold weather conditions, no encampment shall remain if during an extreme cold weather event, the conditions of the encampment are deemed by city officials or law enforcement to be inadequate to protect life or limb. So kind of, it's a little vague for me, right? Because I mean, I know there was people that stayed out in the winter months all last year, and with a propane heater, even in a tent, you can probably stay fairly warm. So I think that would just be at the discretion of the city officials, law enforcement, be like, look, you don't have any heat at all, kind of deal, right? This is not safe for you to be here, is how I would look at that.
And ultimately, I think that it's fine if everything goes well, but if one of your officers makes contact with them and they say, no, I've got this little heater, I do fine, how much culpability do you have if you come back in the morning and it wasn't fine?
Right. Yeah, and that's obviously the liability side of things, right?
And also like thinking about, you know, if they don't have a heat source, and I mean, we've seen it significantly in the St. John area where people don't have heat, but they've got all the blankets that they can possibly muster up. If you say like that, you know, you can't remain because it's an extreme cold weather, like where do they go next? Because like if we say no, you can't pack up, go, they're just going to end up somewhere else in the same situation. So I think just thinking about that to some degree of like, what's the next step if we don't have an emergency site to say, okay, like you can't stay here tonight, but I'm going to bring you to XYZ until the weather comes back. But the idea of just saying, you know, it's too cold for you to be here, you gotta pack up. It's not, I don't think it's gonna change. They're still gonna be extreme homeless. Yeah. It's just gonna be now they have to move on top of that. So I don't know how to reword it, but.
And again, I think that's where the resource part of this conversation comes in, right? Like I don't see myself responding to an encampment in the wintertime because of extreme weather or whatever the situation is and being like, hey, you got to pack up and leave. Best of luck to you. You're out. See you later. You can't be here. Like it's going to be a combination of, hey, Chris, Casey, like I have these people staying here. Like what can we do with them? Can we put them in the hotel for the night so we can get situated? Like I totally hear you. And I can try to reword this a little bit to like put in there about wrapping resources.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just the way you read it now is like someone could walk up and
like,
say,
get up, get out, and see you later.
Exactly.
Yeah. Jenna's got a question. Go ahead,
I
Jenna.
didn't really hear what Casey was saying at the beginning, only caught the end of it, but I think it's along these same lines of in the only place that Casey and I have kind of done this is in St. John's. One of the things that was added to the list of like of places you can't be is then what? So people were given a warning. There was a posting that happened at the encampment, and then a kind of a warning that they had so many days to vacate the encampment, and then that gave law enforcement time to work with community partners and to say, hey, we gotta move. There's 4 people under that bridge. I get them warned. Hopefully they'll move on their own. If they don't move on their own, you know, what do we do in between? And then it gives us time to have our staff go underneath the bridge and meet the 4 people that are there and offer resources and say like, hey, look, it's posted, you've been warned, you know, they want you to move. how can we help you do that? And then we've been able to do that and partner with law enforcement and go in with law enforcement or other community partners and help people figure out how to relocate. And sometimes they take us up on it, and sometimes they just try to weed it out, stay underneath the bridge until, you know, but then what happens, right?
Right.
I even kind of like, I wonder about the purpose of this 3v5.
To really speak up, Chris, I'm sorry.
I like wonder about the purpose of 3v5, right? Like, where if you playing out the hypothetical, you're going there and saying it's too cold for you to camp there. I guess I'm partially like, why is it, unless it's one of these other categories?
Yeah.
Why is it our decision that it's too cold for a person to camp? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I think it goes back to the frustration of, let's just say somebody calls the police station and says, hey, there's a family camping out here, like, can you guys help them out? And I'm like, nope. Right, so, and I get you, like, does it even need to be in here? No. Should we have to tell people that they shouldn't camp in the cold weather, but some people don't have any other option?
I just think, is there another one of these categories or buckets that
could fall in?
That falls in, right? Like, it's Gardner Park, right? You can't be there. It's private property. You can't be there. It's close to the railroad tracks.
Can't be there.
Yeah, because presumably this person is in a legal place to camp, and we're showing up and saying, it's too cold. I think it's worth saying, you know, we're concerned about you. Here's some potential resources.
Yeah, but I hear you, and I think that makes sense, and I don't have a problem. I'll do some research on this part of it to see what other places have as well, and maybe we just leave that out, right? Because maybe it does take the liability off agencies that are trying to help, if that actually happens.
Yeah.
Janice got something.
Yeah, I mean, I think also that you've listed lots of places where you wouldn't want people camping, and like, I'm trying to think of, are there places where they could be, and that would be okay, and I could maybe Casey said this, but I couldn't remember. But like, like in St. Johnsbury, we have people on the rail trail camping, like, we don't love that, but it's that choice of like, I don't think our town manager and our, you know, select, we don't want them in the downtown camping, right? Like, so we know there's folks on the rail trail, town forest, but they're not underneath the bridge going by Price Chopper, but we know that that's a better choice than downtown at the Welcome Center, right? Like, so I think it's that fine line, and then also bringing us in as resources. So like, our housing outreach staff know who is where. And we go out to the sites and ask them to come into shelter, or how can we, you know, sign you up for other services and do that work. But
that's so.
If nowhere, then it becomes a bigger problem. Like, can't be here, can't be there, and then people are just going to go from place to place to place to place. Like,
yeah, and that's essentially what we do now, is we just kind of move everybody around. This question came up last meeting, Jenna, of like, why can't we put on there where people can go? And we thought as a group that it would be better to put the places that you're not allowed to be, not promote like, hey, you can camp here, right? And there's honestly not a lot of land in Newport that's owned by the city of Newport and open to the public anyways, where they can, so that's why we omitted that. But I'm not saying it's right, but that's what we came up with.
No, I know. There's no like great answer. Like, one of the best public places that St. Johnsbury, there's land, I think Chris can attest to this, is out at the correctional center. Well, no one wants to go camp at the correctional center, right? Like, and when we tossed that around as an option, I was like, oh, maybe that's not going to be a very popular spot for people to go.
Yeah.
It's hard.
So I'll do some digging around that number 5, 3B5, and if maybe we just eliminate that one.
Yeah, I mean,
see, Pam's trying to get in. I see Larry raising a hand. Let's just make sure we're including others.
For anybody listening to
this. You have to speak up.
For anybody listening to this, and I am recording it, what this sounds like is, if you're homeless, well, we're not really saying it's your own fault and you're criminals, but don't stop here. Just keep moving. We're all about liability. We're all about, really, we don't give a flying whoop-de-doo, but we'd like you not to make the place look untidy. That may not really be what you think, but it's certainly what I'm hearing. And it's incredibly sad. Yesterday, the state kicked everybody out of the motels. And if this great big beautiful shitty bill goes through, there's going to be a hell of a lot more people who are homeless. So how about reframing this and looking at what we can do as opposed to what we can do to cover our asses? Because that just doesn't feel right to me.
So Pam, I hear you, and if you have constructive suggestions about it, I think we're all open to hearing them. I think people are genuinely wrestling with it.
Then let's stop telling people to just keep moving and come up with somewhere.
Well, that's
not
the
as an
conversation.
open invitation to y'all come and camp here.
That's the conversation we're trying to have. So if you have
I'm not
suggestions
doing it.
about it, people are genuinely wrestling with this question. I hear it if you don't. So if you have suggestions about ways to approach this differently, I think people around this table are open to hearing them. So
There is certainly space at Prouty Beach where people could stay and stay safely.
You're good. Okay, Larry?
Well, it could be reworded because you said that, and I know of a couple that have spent 2 winters that we help, but they rather be out there. It's their preference. But they stay warm with a heater. So it says no encampment, but you could make an allowance if they have heat in that tent and they're not bothering anybody.
Right.
So just say, do you have enough gas for your heater?
I guess
No, we're gonna run out.
That goes back to what Chris said, right?
Yeah,
Like, let's
and
just say.
then you can contact somebody like me or whatever, and we'll make sure that they have heat.
Yeah.
And I think, we don't go knocking on doors in the winter and say, hey, is your house warm enough, right? Not to be too much of a reductionist, but that's similar to what we're talking about. Is like, this is your home. If you don't have heat, of course we have services to help you, and we aren't going to check on that most of the time. So I think it's just another sort of like, sort of related.
So we could reword that to, during extreme cold weather events, we will make certain that the ones that are camping have the resources to keep warm. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. You're saying that just
Unless you have a place to send them to. But if you don't have anywhere to send them to,
right. And I think
one or two nights in a motel is not going to be enough.
Yeah, I really just want to point out that this policy, rough draft ordinance that's in front of everybody here was not something Travis and I just sat down and came up with without using St. Johnsbury's, Montpelier's, and Burlington's ordinance that they have for parks. Like, this is all the same exact language that's in every city's policy, town, homelessness issues that they have, is this language that's in here.
Wow.
Right? So this is not language that him and I came up with to say, hey, how can we not allow anybody to stay in Newport that's homeless and we don't care about it? No, that's why we're having this meeting, and that's why we have this task force here. Like, that's the point of this.
Anne's trying to go.
When I hear Travis say that at the last meeting, you decided that you weren't going to tell people where they could go, that the group decided you were going to tell them where they can't go. And on a lot of these committees, and particularly on that decision, you did not take a vote. I don't know how you reached the idea that the group decided that we weren't going to tell people where they could go, but only where they couldn't go. By the time you gave people this list anyway of where they couldn't be, poor people who don't have places to stay, I think it's outrageous. And at least if you're going to say that this is how that you're going to do it, and that's what you're going to recommend to the council, I think that you need to take a vote or establish some way of getting consensus. How many of everybody is willing to say, no, we're going to let these people settle in one area, and as soon as it's one of these things, we're going to tell them to move on. Move on, move on. Well, where should we go, they say. And you say, oh, well, no, we can't tell you where to go. We can only tell, you've got to guess that. We can only tell you where you can't be. It's outrageous.
this is a naive question, but is the city council the one with the authority to say that someone could camp on public land?
In the city, yes.
In some ways, it makes me think that that question should be posed to them, and if they, as a city council, want to, at their next meeting, look at the city map and designate places, then we would have more to work from, but I don't think this group has the authority.
Well, so if I could push back a little bit on that. The whole point of this exercise is that the city council's juggling an awful lot of material, and I don't think the city council's prepared to do anything like the amount of thoughtful deliberation to come to a conclusion about that without some guidance. So in fact, that's exactly what this group, in my judgment, has been asked to do, is to say, we've custom discussed this question, and here's where we are, and we're of one mind, or we're of more than one mind, and we've got questions about it, and here are the questions that we'd like the council to wrestle with.
So if we, as a group, identified a safe location and presented that to the council, then they would decide if that was a safe, inappropriate location for camping?
I think, I don't know how the council would respond to it. Honestly, I don't know how I would respond to it. While I am incredibly sympathetic to the points that Pam and Ann are raising, I don't want to see the act of being without a home criminalized, right? And I think a lot of us around the table would say the same thing. It is not lost on me that cities that have tried to do exactly what we're talking about have ended up with huge issues around both public perception and community safety. And in the end, they've gone on, many of, in fact, one was just recent, I think, in Oregon, where they went in and took out an entire encampment, right? So, and I know, it's a reality that if whatever we establish is something we're going to have to figure out how to manage over time.
Sure.
So I would love to know where we think we could reasonably put people who don't have any other options. But that's kind of the whole point of the problem, right? That's why people become unhoused in the first place.
Isn't our goal here is to tweak this document?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
So-
and if there are major questions in the document, then to talk about them until we figure out what we want to do with it.
Okay.
But to that question about the difference between telling people where they can go and where they can't go, there may be, half a dozen places where people can go in limited numbers, where they're not causing a problem, where nobody ever calls, where Travis never has to go and clear anything out. The problem in establishing an area, it's a very fine line. It becomes, everybody gets told the same place, and all of a sudden that place where maybe one or two people camped could be there and be non-obstructive and be fine, all of a sudden it's become a problem, and there's also the risk of attracting more people. Oh, I heard that I don't have to be in the shelter here in St. Johnsbury. I can grab a tent and go up the road to Newport, and they have a place for me there. And I hear what you're saying. It doesn't seem as compassionate as you would like. But I don't think he's looking to clear out places where if somebody finds a place to be who has no home and has a place where they're not bothering anybody.
Right.
It's the difference between doing that and saying, here, come here and set up here, and then it becoming a problem, then you do have to figure it out.
Well, you could limit how many you would have in that area.
Yeah.
You make that part of the deal.
Go ahead, Jenna.
Thanks. I must look kind of crazy because I have to lean in all the way to my computer to hear, but I'm sorry, I'm trying to look a little like, what if, I'm just thinking, like, a little bit of backward design, right? Like, if the goal is everyone has a place to be, how do you work from that goal backwards? Because I think we're stuck in the reality, right? The reality is we want people, it's like the both and, right? Like, the hearts and minds here want, like, the heart is saying, like, everyone deserves dignity and needs a place to be. And then we also know that there's an economic impact to your downtown, to your culture and way of life in our communities when people are unhoused and people who choose to be unhoused. And like, I don't want to forget this in this conversation, that it's not as easy as like, oh, we're going to build a shelter, like have a shelter, or have people come to St. John's Place. Some people choose to be outside and in their community. If they are from Newport, they don't want to stay in Newport, they don't want to go anywhere. So I think, like, how do we work backwards around, like, what, if we want people housed, and we want people to be safe, and we want to decide if people want to stay in their community, what do people need to be safe, right? And some people like to be together in an encampment kind of style, but some people don't. They just want to be in their tent and they want to be alone and they want to do their thing. So I don't know if it's easy as saying like, oh, here's the place to be, but like, how do we develop places that people could get services? Like, we could like developing outreach campaigns to be able to reach people to say like, hey, you could wander into 70 Main Street in Newport and get support. You could go to this church. This door is always open. And like build some sort of relationships also to let people know what resources are and make those connections, like Journey to Recovery. Like, I don't know who all these individuals are. I don't know even when we're talking about individuals, like what the number is, and how many are unsafely camping right now. Like, I don't know that either. And I mean, I think if you started and looked at, like, are there the higher risk individuals, and just in an individual way, you could build relationships with people and move people along rather than sweeping policies. And I think policies are important, and I think policies are designed to keep people safe, but policies, and I think everyone in law enforcement knows this, like, policies and rules do not govern and change behavior for some people. Relationships and the context of relationships are when people can change. Because we can policy this and create laws and rules, and our end result in months to come will be we might be in the exact same spot. So, I don't know what your thoughts, reactions are. And I do think policy is important. I think we need a policy. But I'm just thinking on the backwards of the teaching relational part of connections.
Where does that leave you or lead you in terms of a next step, Jenna? Like, I'm not quite sure I understand what the point of your exercise is, which is not to say I'm disparaging it. I mean, I genuinely don't understand what it would lead us to do differently in terms of our thought process.
I think developing a strategy for the town that is based on relationships and who in proximity, like who, like, I don't know, like if I was there in the room and, or if I lived in Newport, which I don't, I might know individuals that are experiencing housing insecurity. And you may know them because you have utilize the police department more frequently. They might use services or require EMS or emergency support sometimes. So like if we had some sort of quantitative data, or who are the folks in the community that you think are experiencing street homelessness who need the most intervention and support. I've never met anybody who is sleeping outside who doesn't have multiple issues. So if we tackle it from a needs perspective, what do people need? Do people need human connection, do they need medical support? Do they need mental health intervention? I don't know the things that people need. They just need the same consistent person that's going to show up every day, build a trusting relationship to move people into a housing situation is a really incredibly challenging thing to do. And I think, we want them to be in safe areas. I don't know what are unsafe areas, but you certainly have a thought around where people are currently and what to do. So I think as a group, how do we expand the membership here? Like I was thinking, like Northeast Human Services, someone from Northern County Healthcare. So you have the drop-in, you have the walking clinic right there too. And then how do you have a list of people? Like, are they utilizing police? Are you responding to people? Again, you probably know who everyone is. And like, what are people's in needs?
It seems like that may be touched on in section 6. It certainly, it's not as in depth as as you described, but, it seems to reference that by offering information, shelter referrals, and transportation where feasible. I mean, certainly that could be expanded, and ideally, that would be something as a task force we could identify what those steps could be or who to contact, what agencies.
Right, because we learn about people, if you approach people and, we approach them from NECA and say, we have this shelter in St. John's, are you willing to go, and they flat out say no, right? But then we learn something about that person. Why is Newport special? And then we can find out, do they have an aunt there? Do they have any natural connections that we can help mediate through our Community and Social Justice Center? Can we do some mediation to help repair and rekindle some relationship? If that's what they want to stay in Newport. I think there's more information that we can uncover through those relationships.
It's also a two-part, we talked about this last time, that there's two pieces to this. There's, I think of the scene in Apollo 13 where they threw all the parts together and, how to make the round thing fit in the square hole. We've got lots of resources here we have to throw together and see what we can cobble together to have resources for the unhoused. But we also have to put a tool in the hands of NPD so that they can interact with them and have rules that govern that interaction. Because right now there's nothing. And I think that's, this isn't, I know sometimes legal language is harsh, but this isn't the everything piece of the puzzle. There's still the whole resource part. This is just, does this tool work to give NPD the guidance that they need to interact with these folks fairly and justly, while they're getting them those resources?
Can I jump in there for a second? Adam's been trying to get a word in. Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you very much for your service. You guys are moving in the right direction. There's different types of homeless and different reasons why there are homeless. If someone is homeless by choice, they're a nomad. We have couch hoppers one day, and then the next day they're homeless, and then they're couch hopping again. Now, there's a difference between somebody that just lost their house due to a fire and somebody who's in a domestic violence situation. So a cheat sheet for this particular person type situation. You understand? You don't bring the domestic violence person to the community homeless shelter. Does that make sense? So each type of homeless. You have juveniles thrown out of their houses, so you have a homeless shelter for them. In New York City, it's called Covenant House. So when you have the nomads, homeless tourism is definitely a thing where people are gaming the system. I used to work at the food pantry over here, and people would hear about the stuff and come to Newport for the resources. And once the resources were gone, they stopped coming. Not to be heartless, but exactly what you were saying, if you make a designated place, it becomes a magnet, and people will game the system. People that need it the most have too much pride to ask for help.
So, go ahead, if you can finish up, I want to try.
If there's a disaster where a lot of people are homeless all at the same time, I sent the links for the mobile showers, mobile washing machines, and then the huge tents that are heated. Thank you.
So I wonder if we might want to have Travis walk us through the rest of this document, so we're looking at all of it as a piece.
Well, yes, we can do that. My suggestion is maybe we take this, now that everybody has this, everybody can go through it on their own, make notes, we can bring it back to the next meeting, because there's still a lot to go through here. And then we can go through everyone's questions, comments, concerns that they have after they've gone through the whole document themselves and have been able to consume it a little bit more, because there is stuff in the end of this that I think do cover a lot of the concerns, Jen, that you had talked about. And again, like Travis had mentioned, right now there is 0 policies, ordinances in place for the police when they respond. My officers are responding to calls pretty regular, and our responses, and I feel like everybody thinks we just show up at these calls and like, you gotta get out of here. Like, you can't, that's not the case at all. Like I know of several people right now that are camping on the railway, that are camping behind Pulling Grain, they're camping up off the access road. Have I been to any of those? No, haven't been to one of them, right? So like this is designed to help us direct officers on what they can do and what they can't do when they are responding to this. The end goal is to get everybody in a location where it's safe and safe for the community, and that's our responsibility as police. So I think to move forward best in this, that everybody takes this, they go through it, they make notes, and then we can bring it back to the table, because I do want to hear about the resource part of this at the end as well.
And I think context is important to your point, right? This is not the final thing that we're giving to the council.
Right.
Like this is just a very small piece, I think, of what this task force is doing. So
yep,
I appreciate that.
Can I ask a question about the no encampment or something permitted within 500 feet of these distances? Is that just the structure, or does that include the people that live in those structures?
You can transit areas. It's putting up an actual, living structure within that distance. Right. So if you were,
but if you're a school,
if you were camped at Prouty Beach and you walked up by the high school, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just so you can transit that area. You can't go and put your tent right there adjacent to the school.
All right.
So does that work for everybody? Is everybody good with that? And then next time we'll just go through the other sections that we haven't covered, and we'll just talk about what the concerns are, and then after that we'll try to come up with like a draft that's representative of this group that will then forward to the council.
Great.
Okay.
And maybe the different agencies can, spell out what they're prepared to deal with. For example, Human Services may be the agency to contact if the campers are unhoused, that are experiencing mental crisis. If it's a family, for example, perhaps NEK might have something to think about. Part of this, the significant part is not just telling them to move on. It's also saying, these are some resources that may be able to help you. We're asking you and requesting you to move based on this ordinance and these reasons. And I think that's probably the best we can do.
In New York City, it's called the street sheet. The cops have street sheets, and then like a flyer. This is what's available for the particular need. Just copy and paste.
Before we move on, you'll see little footnote numbers throughout the appendix. That's case law that governs those sections and the more impactful ones. And then the legal review, that's really intended for the attorneys for the city of Newport, and it goes over in more detail the legal viability of this ordinance.
Just for a point of understanding, are we only doing hour-long meetings going forward, or are we here till 5?
What we had suggested is that we would be running somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half.
Okay. I just wasn't sure, because I think that I think that it is helpful to review it as a team, and I think I appreciate doing the notes and going through. I also want to make at any point, if it seems like we're saying move on, that's not necessarily the case. And I think we all have experience in doing this, and I think that everything that we've gone through so far is exactly what you said. It's all the other places. Like St. Jay's doing the same exact thing, and it gives officers the ability to do the thing that they need to do, which is keep people safe in the communities, all people. And while it is unfortunate that our unhoused neighbors are the ones that are being asked to move in some cases, whether or not that's for it sounds like right now that's not necessarily what's happening, but like even if this is in place, if we're asking our unhoused neighbors to move, there's a reason why, and it's based in safety. And like, unfortunately for the folks that are unhoused, like if you are camping 10 feet away from a train track, you are at risk of getting hurt. And like there is a reason for like this to be in place, as the same thing with St. Johnsbury has been. It's like it keeps everybody safe. It keeps you from having to respond to someone that was brutally injured by a train going through. So like, I think that like, and from where we were last meeting till now, I think that all of us around the table have the understanding like this is just that one piece of it, and like this is going to be the part that is unfortunately shitty to get through, because it's the legal piece of it. It's the part that's going to hurt. Like it's gonna feel not great because we're dealing with people's lives and we're trying to like sum it up in a 10-page document. But it's also the most, like, it is a very important part. So like personally, I still feel that there is, the open conversation that we were having was really great. It was just like bouncing off points, because like I think the extreme cold weather condition we came up with, like it probably makes sense to drop it, because all of the other things are based in safety as it relates to the community itself, like rather than the individual themselves that's experiencing homelessness outward. It's more inward than outward. Right. So like, but I think that like the reason we came to that and we were able to balance all of those is because we are all here. So I don't know, I hear like wanting to move forward and doing this on our own, but I also think that there is some thing about us all.
Yeah, no, I think like I don't want everybody to do it on their own. I think it would be easier to go through this on your own once, right? And then make any notes you have, and then come back, and then we'll continue to go through it the exact same way. And I guess I'll take the blame for it. I should have put this out to everybody prior to this meeting, but I didn't, so I think it would be easier for everybody to go through it, digest it, think about it. Stuff's going to pop up, and then we can come back and continue the exact same way that we just did. And I don't want to lose sight of everyone's time. Like it's almost 4:30 now. We've already been here an hour, so if we touch base on the resources stuff, it's going to be close to 5 o'clock anyway. So.
Okay. Should we move on to the resource question?
Yeah.
Resources.
Can I just ask, are you all finding it easier to hear?
A little less.
Or is it still really difficult?
It depends who's talking.
Okay. I think what was happening before is that the laptop speaker is the one that was trying to, audio is the one that was trying to use the mic and not the owl. So I think it should be easier, but if you all just keep remembering to speak up. Okay?
So I have a question for Chris, maybe. Chris, is it possible for you to invite other community partners to this meeting that you might think that might be impactful when thinking about resources?
I think so. I'm looking at Rick. Is that something we have discretion to do?
It's your committee.
Sure.
Yeah, 100%. And there's people that aren't here that were here last week, and
The first week?
The first week, yeah. So, but we certainly can look at the list again and see if we've omitted anybody.
Yeah, I'm happy to invite. NKHS was one of the folks I had written down, and then Northern Counties, maybe the practice manager from urgent care would be willing to pop in. I'd imagine they're seeing folks come in too.
Well, and NKHS has an Excel document for a year's worth of outreach stuff that me and Coral were doing. Like we collected all of that data, so Sherry Lee has a nice spreadsheet somewhere of all of those interactions.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, back.
Adam, go ahead.
I have a worker that's on parole. If his parole officer wants to attend, would he be welcomed? Because when people come out of the detainment center, they don't have anywhere to go. So that's a different reason for being homeless.
We have representation from PNP on the screen today.
Right, if you're good, then you're good. I was just bringing up that type of homeless.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Sort of justice too, like some of those folks, right?
Yeah.
That are coming out.
Yeah, hard stuff.
I guess just quickly to touch on that, DOC does have a reentry specific person, or correct me if I'm wrong, but handles a reentry meeting where they review folks that are coming into the community.
We got guys dropped off at the gas station on a regular.
Adam, please let folks have the conversation.
I won't go into the nuance of why that happens sometimes and leave that up to DOC, but there is a times there's an anticipated number of folks that are going to be released into a certain community, and the Department of Correction brings folks together to have a meeting to talk about what supports and services can help move that person along. So I'd let Art speak more if you'd like.
It depends on the circumstances. I mean, if somebody's been incarcerated and they have a release date, we obviously have time to do some release planning. Sometimes people go to court and the court says, we'll release them today, they need sentence today, no notification, and they're dropped on our doorstep, and then we have to plan for them. Now, there is transitional housing within Newport. We have 2 transitional houses that we use, and they're more than full most times with a waiting list. So I guess I don't know. I mean, every case is different. I guess I'd have to know more detail on who it is and what the circumstances were for it. But I can say that we do get dropped cases once in a while. They're right to our lap, and we use a lot of the community partners that they help us out. So we've got somebody here that was dropped off with no clothes, no food, no nothing, and they're more than willing to step up. I think with this problem here, one of the biggest things is a list for the local PD to have, saying here is the people that we can refer you to. Having somebody that can help them with the referrals, because we can hand them a piece of paper with all the names in the world on it. Doesn't mean that they're going to get there or have the ability to do that. We've had a case recently that the PD knows real well. We had several options for him to go to reside at, and every time he'd say, "Yep, I'm going to go, I'm going to do this," and then the day that we're supposed to move him in, "No, I'm not doing that." So there's a lot of circumstances and everything when this happens. And a lot of work that goes into it. But I can tell you with the PD, with NEK, with any of these community partners, there's a lot of compassion. There's no pushing people out of the way.
So I think the first big resource that folks often rely on, which will have some changes, is the GA Hotel Motel program, which is relatively accessible, but folks do have to meet a certain criteria and will now be limited to 80 nights per year. So that's after hours, you're calling 211. During business hours, you're calling the GA number, which I don't know off the top of my head, but is easily accessible. And they'll do their best to place you in a hotel as close to where you're coming from. However, we have very limited hotel space in the kingdom. So we have the Border Motel has a handful of rooms. The Pinecrest has a handful of rooms, but I think most know that's up for sale. So not sure what the future of that will look like. And then down in St. Johnsbury, we have the Fairbanks Inn and Colonnade Inn. So that is a resource that can be used in emergencies, albeit there is a criteria folks have to meet to get access to that.
So, do you want me to take this? Do you want to take this?
Oh, I can.
Okay.
So I just need a simple list, and sorry guys, I don't have it PDF file to email to you right away. But area resources that I know about, and probably most of the people here, I just made a list that I could share with everybody. We can hopefully add some. Larry, I did not think to add any church-based services to this list of resources, so those are not on there. But for general assistance, there's always economic services. And for all of these, I only listed the phone numbers, not addresses. But economic services, there's NECA, all the different departments of NECA, the food shelf, emergency housing, youth services, the Hive Youth Center, which would obviously only be for youth, but we definitely, and we have stuff donated from NKHS as well for homeless youth. Backpacks full of stuff that, like toiletries and stuff like that, really can take. Umbrella for domestic violence stuff. There's RCT, NECLs for any educational stuff. Department of Health and WIC. North Country Hospital also is a huge resource. And then for mental health services, I put Northeast Kingdom Human Services, the Front Porch, the 988 you can call or text for mental health. Right here on Main Street is Making a Comeback Mental Health. And then NEK Counseling, recovery services, substance use, Journey to Recovery, There's Savita, BART, Better Life Partners, and Valley Vista are all resources for people. And then for employment stuff, I listed Hireability and the Vermont Department of Labor. So if there's any that I've missed that you guys can think of.
I'm thinking we should add is it Teen Challenge? It's not adult Teen Challenge? Or
It's Men in Teen Challenge, and that one's in like Johnson or something, and then Women in Teen Challenge is in Hardwick.
Yeah, I think we should add both of those.
They're both like Christian-based recovery programs.
I think it's important to just say out loud, there's very few options for immediate access to shelter aside from the shelter at Moose River, Haven and Barry. I think we can compile a list of those pretty easily. They often run at capacity, but I think it's just something for us to continue to bear in mind as we have these conversations when it comes to getting someone out of the cold on a cold night. There may very well not be an option. So.
One thing I can add to that is I've had a little bit of conversation with Frank Cheney, who's our zoning administrator, and there is nothing in our zoning bylaws currently or in the ones that are proposed that would limit our ability to find a place to get people out of the cold in our downtown area at night. So we're not bound by any major constrictions there.
That was kind of my understanding of these meetings, was this was kind of the first step of it. And then we're hopefully going to have a plan before this coming winter.
We've absolutely been talking about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amber, I have a question. You're with NECA, right?
Yes,
What about that building that's been empty?
that was a Casey question.
Yonks.
Nice move.
Which building's been empty?
Huh?
Which one? Bluff Road?
Yeah, the one
Up
close
by
to
the
the school.
hospital?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we actually sold that building.
You did?
Yes,
Oh.
we did. Yeah, we no longer own that building, but I think that there are options, we've talked about them before, of how we could pull together, space in the community to be able to do something like that. And I think to the point that Amber made and that was made earlier is like there's these two phases, and one was getting through this while we also were doing this kind of asset mapping. So that we really could make a jump going forward. And I think that that's a huge answer to one of the big questions that we had last time we met was, would we be bound by anything as a community to not be able to put a shelter in some area? And now I think like knowing that that's not, that we don't have that, part of this asset mapping that I think we can do moving forward is figuring out the spaces and places in this community that are A, willing and B, able to house folks in the cold, whether that be in a basement of a church, in the basement of a building, and a school gym, and whatever that looks like. And then from there we can look at, okay, how do we get, how's it staffed? What's the operational piece of it? So I think like next steps definitely would be around asset mapping our community and saying, yeah, we've got 2 churches that are willing to split the month or something like that, or we've got a property that is perfect for a community partner to move into and operate a shelter out of, whatever that may be. But to Chris's point, like outside of that, folks are still going to end up, there is obviously the ability to house folks in an immediate way in a hotel room overnight, but to do that comes with funds that I don't think really any of the agencies, including AHS, have options to really pull from on, I know, a regular basis, but like even in some cases in an emergency one. And also on top of all of that, you're always going to have the person that doesn't want to go into shelter, doesn't want to go into GA, and is still going to end up camping in the dead of winter on a negative 5-degree night. And that's what I think this policy is important for is, I don't think there's a space in Newport that any of us around the table would be comfortable saying like, yes, you can camp here in downtown Newport, but being able to say there are areas where you can camp that you're not going to be, as long as you are following the status quo of the things, that you're going to be fine there. So I think kind of procedure-wise, this is like a big first piece to be able to lay the ground, and then at the same time thinking about these resources so that once we have this, we can also jump into this kind of almost immediately thereafter. Because this planning of a shelter, and Chris and I both know, is not it takes a long time. There's a lot of people that have to come into play, a lot of funders statewide, and unfortunately, it does take a lot of time. And just a bunch of feet. Yeah, and it's right. We just don't. It just doesn't. Yeah, we just don't show up and start doing it unless we're just opening up a basement for someone to go in and it's not being staffed and all the things, which I can't imagine is something that we would be interested in doing as a community. So.
Well, I think there's probably something that's halfway in between those two. I mean, that's kind of what we were describing from my experience in Rockland County, New York, right, where you don't have a totally untended space, but you also don't have professional staff who have to manage it, particularly given the number of people we're talking about in Newport at this point, right? So, the ability to say, here's a space, when it gets super cold, if there's somebody who needs a place to be, we will put them up, there's food in the fridge, there are volunteers on call who will come and spend the night, and just, I think there are ways that we could work that don't start out with the assumption that somehow we've got to staff it. Which is not to say that might not be where we end up long term. Right?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree at all. I think, at this point of being an operational shelter for the year that we have, it just really, the parameters are really important because luckily we are full-time staff, but even the thought of relying on volunteers as a not a last-ditch effort, but if at 5 o'clock a list of volunteers are getting called and you need 2 people to be there and you can only get 1, it's one of those then what happens types of things. So the reason I keep kind of leaning towards an operation that does have some level of staffing or is supported by the state in some degree is because there are dollars there that can do. That's not a myth. They're still looking to expand shelter beds in the state, and so there is funds to be able to do that. It's just a matter of how do we go about doing that as a community. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we have 2 staff there all the time, but we could look into having a coordinator that coordinates that effort so that it's volunteer-based, but it's being run by a central hub, so that it's not kind of the emergency phone tree on a cold night. And also thinking about what does cold night look like, because 32 degrees is still quite chilly to be sleeping outside, and people do it, and that's great, and they feel comfortable doing that. But are we looking to just operationalize a shelter that is cold weather, extreme cold weather, or are we looking for something that really come winter season where we have open regularly, or the ability to open regularly from October till May or whatever it ends up being?
Is the first question out to our faith-based organizations to just survey and see who has an appetite to participate in a discussion like that?
I've contacted St. Mark's, the United Church, and the Derby Community Church. And they're doing pretty much like what we're doing, kind of a limited thing. People come and they need a place to stay in the middle of winter. And I've put a lot of them up in the motel for a couple of days out of my own pocket. And then start looking, and I start looking at you guys for help. One case was a young gal that had a 3-year-old child and was pregnant. And somehow I called the women's house. I don't know if it's still there in Barton, affiliated with New Hope. And the director of that home took that lady in her home. She said, I'll take her and wait till she has the child. So that was a good outcome. But pretty much that's what the churches are doing. They're limited. They do what they can. But you're thinking about opening up a basement and doing that. I don't know of any that would be willing at this point to do something like that. But there's still hope for that. I can keep looking at.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the first question, right? None of this can happen without space. And if we, so I guess first step in any sort of like solution discussion is having a space identified.
So maybe that's some conversation that a few of us who live here in Newport and are close in could begin to try and have this next couple of weeks.
I wonder what kind of capacity front porch would have for a couple spare beds.
It's a great
Good question. Very good question.
Because they're going to be, I mean, they're upfitting it now, right, for people to be able to stay there.
Yeah.
It's a start.
And I'm wondering about, this just came to mind, Ben's house, the old Derby Green. It's a sober house, but I don't know if they wouldn't open it up to, there's tons of rooms there. I don't know, who's with Journey to Recover?
Melissa's on the screen.
Melissa, what about that?
Melissa, you're muted.
Unmute yourself, Melissa.
I haven't spoken once today, so I didn't have to. I can speak a little about Ben's house. For someone to be able to access Ben's house, they need to first be able to go to treatment first. They need to come directly from treatment or DOC and then be able to access Ben's house.
Okay.
That way, there's a ground base to come from. And I would worry about mixing, people that are still in active use with people that are working their recovery.
Right, yeah.
So if I could just jump in here, I had to schedule a council meeting tonight in this space at 5 o'clock to try and work on some of our financial issues. So we're coming down to the wire on the time that we have room available. And it sounds like we've got some homework. Travis is going to send or resend the document that we've already been talking about tonight, so that everybody can give feedback. Members of the community have a hard copy, and you're welcome to offer feedback to any one of us on the council, on the task force as well, to make sure those concerns get lifted up. And that would be a topic of the next conversation, next meeting. And then another topic would be for some of us who are local and live and work here all the time to have some conversation about what options might be out there for us to be thinking ahead on, in terms of physical space where we can put people on cold nights this morning.
Well, the United Church is ideal. They've got a real accessible basement.
I think there are a number of opportunities.
I can contact them again. Their pastor lives in
Johnson.
I haven't met him yet.
I have. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think opening up the basement and not receiving anything for it could be a difficult ask, but thinking again, if we were able to partner with the state, that we may be able to rent a space underneath kind of that, that the community, whoever ends up doing it, could rent from the church at a rate of whatever for that to occur. So there's also kind of that in our back pocket if there's other options to go, rather than just if it's volunteer based, 100% love it, that's the way that it should be. But if it needs to be, if there needs to be an incentive to be able to do it, that also can be something that we've got.
Newport Health and Rehab is still empty, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, that big one across from the hospital?
Oh, yeah.
It's actually, the city of Newport could just buy that.
It's up for sale.
I don't know. Be a great shelter.
Okay, so our next moving is 16.
You already have that in front of them? I'll look right here.
When?
That would be the 16th.
Yes, next meeting is the 16th, 3:30. Okay?
Roger that.
We'll use the same Zoom line next time, but we'll distribute it again.
Yeah, I think I'm going to solidify an email group.
that'd be great. If you could do that between you and Kevin, and also send, if one of you could send a calendar
I will,
invite.
yeah.
That you'll have to send two is what I'm figuring out. You've got to send one for first Wednesdays and one for third Wednesdays, and you can copy the Zoom invite into both.
Don't forget the shindig. Wednesdays on the waterfront.
Food trucks are out front.
I might reach out just to make sure I got everything.
Thanks, everybody.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Art.
Nice to meet you, Gavin.